So as I went through that process, my wife was journeying in the same aspects as I was, battling with this onslaught of all this stuff that's happening and wondering what in the world is going to happen, what's going to take place, what's our future, where do we go from here? You know, and I often talk about it in the context of my worth. What was taking place during that period of time was very hard because my worth was really wrapped up in what I did. And now to be moved into a realm where, in some respects, you're isolated, you're almost alone, and trying to figure out what in the world's going on. We really had a lot of questions in relationship to our future. As we got to the point of the amputation, which was June 18th of 1991, wrestling with all these things, Jan had continued to really battle with depression, and I was really terrible in this situation. I thought if she couldn't get the help from me, and I mean, here I was battling with the cancer, and I didn't know what I was thinking at that time. How in the world am I going to offer any help for her with the state of mind that I'm in? But I was threatened by that. And it was really interesting because at that point, we happened to be on a trip with our book tour. Things were starting to come out in relationship to our first book, Comeback. And it was really interesting because we ended up coming to focus on the family and meeting with Dr. Dobson. And afterwards, my wife pulled him aside and started sharing what she was struggling with and wanting to know if she needed counseling and if she was depressed and all those things. Obviously, he had affirmed all that stuff. And then Jan graciously said, "Would you please talk to my husband and make sure he understands that?" And I'll never forget Dr. Dobson pulling me aside and saying, "Look, your wife is sick. She's physically ill and she needs to get help." And I thought, okay, you know, I respect this man and maybe I need to pay attention to this. From there, we go out to visit John Townsend and Henry Cloud. And John Townsend ends up meeting with us on a Sunday morning and saying the exact same things. And now I'm at a place where I'm like, you know what, God, this is probably very important for me to pay attention to. In the midst of my struggle and trying to figure out who I am, now that I can no longer be a baseball player, my wife is reeling from trying to be everything to everybody, including me, in the midst of this journey that we're on, this story that's unfolding. And with that, I finally agreed that we should go to counseling, and John Townsend helped us to get into that counseling. 3 weeks in, I was the guy on the couch that was spilling my guts about wrestling with who am I if I can no longer be a baseball player. And that was a very critical moment in my life. That was an amazing time because I finally was willing to admit that I needed help. And I couldn't do this on my own, and I couldn't go it alone. And Jan couldn't do that either, but she was already in a place where she was more than willing. As we went through that process, things began to unfold in the context of the dream. We had thousands of people, tens of thousands of people who were writing and telling us their story. In the middle of all this stuff that I'm telling you about, that we're going through, people are just pouring out their hearts. They're sharing their pain through cancer, other types of affliction, but literally thousands of people pouring out their hearts. And we're like, what are we going to do with this? How do we respond? And my wife, being the type of person she is, she wanted to respond to every piece of mail. And so what we didn't know at the time was that something was unfolding in the midst of our own pain and suffering. And it was revolving around this whole idea of when you get to a place in life where you've experienced, or you've gone through a difficult time and you've experienced people who come alongside and comfort you, you recognize first and foremost as a follower of Christ that that's God's faithfulness in His desire to comfort and encourage. He brings people into your life. You know, your best buddy shows up for 4 days and just hangs out with you, and he knows you're hurting and you're depressed. And so all of a sudden we began to see that happen. And as we experienced that, and we heard the cry of all these people, we thought to ourselves, maybe this is what we're supposed to be doing with our life. But I have to be perfectly honest with you, I didn't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole. I mean, I wanted to be as far away from the reminder of cancer as I could possibly be. Because here I sat now as an amputee. I'm finally in the process of healing. even though we have all these people who are writing to us, I want to get on with my life. I want to figure out what's next. And so Jan and I, in the process of this, started to pray and asking God for direction. And we flew out some friends of ours who had no agenda whatsoever with our life, and we began to storyboard. And in the process of storyboarding, it was really interesting because we came face to face with the fact that maybe there really was something that I could do. One of the desires I had was to come to Colorado or to a major city where there's a big league ball club from the National League and help encourage ball players to go deeper with God. That was one of the desires of my heart. And so with that, we came to the conclusion that we were going to move from Youngstown, Ohio, which was where we were both born and raised, and away from family. And I'll never forget, because we had an opportunity to fly out here to Colorado, and it was a great experience. But while we were here, we had an extra 24 hours. So we thought, you know what, we're thinking about moving. Why don't we just check the area out and figure out what's going on? Maybe, we can afford to come this way. And so as a result of that day and looking at 10 houses, the last house we saw, we put a deposit on. And 8 months later, moved out here to Colorado in 1993 thinking, now I know what I'm going to do with my life. And it was really interesting because it was going to be all about baseball. And I was back in that arena that I loved so much. It was like the dream came true, not once, not twice, but the third time. Because the first dream was when I made it to the big leagues. The second dream was when the doctors told me outside of a miracle I'd never pitch, and I pitched. And this new dream is now, I may not be playing, but at least I'm back in the game and I can encourage other ball players in the same way that I was encouraged. That was the whole purpose behind this, was realizing God used something very special in my life to encourage me and to reveal His faithfulness, and now I wanted to do the same thing. And every door closed. And as a result of coming to that place in my life, I realized that this was the dream. This was the ultimate dream.